So this should be exciting. It's about Hitler. Listen, if you don't like it, you could just click off. I'm only doing this for educational purposes. Let's just get right into it. I'm excited. Hope you're excited. Let's go.
Since Germany's military had
Might be a little
to be reduced, Hitler could no longer remain a soldier after the war, but he kept working for the army as an informant. After the war, communists in Germany had attempted a revolution, and
so the communists now start to rise because think about this. After they collapse, right? After they lose and now we have a weak republic, this is the perfect opportunity for communism to rise.
the government was worried about communism in general. So Hitler was tasked with infiltrating and reporting on any new political parties that could pose a communist threat. A new party called the German Workers' Party threw up a whole bunch of red flags, so Hitler went along to one of their meetings, but found that they weren't communist at all. They were extreme right and shared many of his extreme beliefs, so he left the army and signed up to join the party. His fantastic speaking abilities impressed the party's leadership and supporters, and he very quickly rose to the top. He decided the party needed a makeover, so he renamed it to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi for short, and he gave it a new color scheme.
I don't think that was the first idea proposed. I think they had like many others, and I don't think Hitler even thought of the flag himself. Apparently, I don't know if this part is true though, that he was inspired by a Buddhist book. I don't know about that part, but I do know this is not some original design.
The Nazis weren't very specific on policy, but Hitler made extravagant promises to return Germany to its former glory by undoing the Treaty of Versailles and reuniting all ethnic Germans into one nation. He also said that only pure Aryan people should be allowed to be citizens and that all Jews would lose their citizenship. These ideas were already common in extreme right politics, but what set the Nazis apart was Hitler himself, and they quickly became the leading party.
Yeah, so he had an amazing speaking ability. It's kind of sad that someone who actually has talent used it for such evil.
Party on the extreme right. Many of the political parties in Germany at the time had paramilitary wings, and the Nazis were no different. Hitler set up the very descriptive Whole Protection Detachment, later changed to the very delightful Gymnastic and Sports Division, and finally settling on the ominous Storm Detachment, or SA for short. Their job was to defend Nazi party meetings and intimidate political opponents, and they would frequently engage in battles with communists on the streets. Since the Allies had demanded a reduction in Germany's military size, many trained soldiers were left unemployed. They liked the Nazi ideology, and it was only natural for them to join the SA, which grew larger and larger over time. The new democratic government that formed after World War I was pretty weak and ineffective. In order to pay reparations to the Allies, it started printing more money. The problem is that
Don't print money.
printing money doesn't actually give a country more money, it just makes money less valuable.
That is 100% true. See the inflation though, it's gonna be enormous.
So as the country printed more and more money, it became worth less and less, and the currency crashed. In 1919, $1 US was worth about 4 German marks. By December 1923, $1 US was equal to 4.2 trillion marks.
Look at this, 4.5, all the way to 4 trillion. That is enormous.
The price of bread rose to 200 billion marks. Banknotes became worthless. Unsurprisingly, in such an economic crisis, Germany struggled to pay the Allies. The French were pissed about this, so they occupied the Ruhr, an area full of factories, and took the economic output from the area as payment. They treated the German civilians badly, and in total, approximately 130 Germans were killed during the occupation. Germans were furious, and Hitler and the Nazis thought that now would be a great time to lead a revolution. In November 1923, inspired by something a certain bold Italian man did a year earlier, Hitler stormed a meeting at a beer hall and called for an uprising against the government.
Problem here is that though the government's kind of weak and ineffective, they still are competent. There's still something going around. It has some other kinds of strengths with it, so it would be kind of harder to take it down. For something like Italy, it makes sense, right? Because it's not like the government was really that effective or strong. The Weimar Republic they were somewhat competent, and after the loss, people just didn't really want to push anything big. So I can see why they lost. I can see why they didn't really, take over.
Government. With his supporters, he marched on the streets of Munich, hoping the police would join his side. They did not. Hitler was put on trial for treason. He could have been sentenced to life, but the right-wing judges thought he was a pretty cool guy. Hitler knew the judges and knew that they would be lenient, so he took the opportunity to make him a pretty cool guy. Hitler
Wait, what?
knew the judges.
Wow.
and knew that they would be
Hilarious.
lenient, so he took the opportunity to make impassioned speeches during the trial. And in the end, he was
Very clever. He's a very clever person. Again, too bad he used it for such pure evil. It's so crazy.
sentenced to just 5 years in prison, of which he only served 9 months. And when I say prison, it was more like a pleasant hotel stay where he had plenty of time to write a book.
Minecraft. I might want to look into this book just to see the mind of a madman one day. I don't know. It's so disgusting that this stuff was created. I think the book's now burnt now or something. Most of these books are gone. I think that's a good thing, but it would be interesting to look into. I only do this stuff for educational purposes. Trust me, I'm not some neo-Nazi.
The whole affair was covered by the media nationwide, and it made Hitler famous. Hitler and his extreme message were now known throughout Germany, but the everyday German still didn't care much for him. In the 1928 election, the Nazis only won about 2% of the vote. Many were still intimidated by all the violence and the shouting and how unpolitician-like he was, but a new economic crisis would change all of that. To help Germany pay its reparations, America agreed to give it loans. In October 1929, the Wall Street crash happened, and America wanted its money back. The economic strain this put on an already struggling Germany was severe. Unemployment skyrocketed, poverty was widespread, and Germans
6 million. And just remember, the population was 68, 70 million people. 70 million Germans. This is almost 1/10 of the entire population. And when you cut in kids, it's even worse.
were sick of it. It was clear that the newly formed democracy wasn't working. In the face of crisis, Germans began moving to the political extremes. If you were German and wanted change, your choices now were either the communists or the Nazis. Hitler claimed that he was the only one who could return Germany to its former glory. The Nazi Party used propaganda to make Hitler seem like a great and powerful man.
That would be so crazy. Imagine you're just one person there and you saw all of this. You saw all this forming. That's just kind of crazy to think about. It'd be interesting to visit this place just to see. It's kind of scary, honestly.
And they gave the German people a scapegoat to blame for all their suffering. The promise of a single strong dictator was a breath of fresh air for Germans after years of failing democracy. Some bought into his extreme ideology. Some didn't agree with the racism, but were willing to vote for him anyway. Many didn't know much about politics at all, but just got caught up in the hype. Election after election, the Nazis became more and more popular, until in 1932, they became the biggest party in the German parliament. Hitler came to truly believe that he was some sort of great, destined savior of Germany. He turned megalomaniac. He decided to run for president and did.
Just know, do you know why they hated the Jews? It's because in the economic crisis, Jews were pretty clever people, and they're smart with money. So basically, they were able to hold themselves together. Meanwhile, ethnic German people were starving. A lot of them were unemployed. It was really bad for them. So it was jealousy, anger, hatred, envy. That's kind of why they hated Jews. And that's why it happened a lot of around the world. And especially back then, that's why they hated Jewish people, and there was anti-Semitism everywhere back then. But hey, at least there's not that much anti-Semitism anymore, right? I think we should show, some respect. You can have your opinions or whatever, just, I guess that's kind of what I got to say. There's nothing else.
Surprisingly well, but still lost to the extremely popular World War I general, Paul von Hindenburg. Since he was now the leader of the biggest party, though, he demanded President Hindenburg make him chancellor, but Hindenburg was reluctant.
The origin of Chancellor came from Otto von Bismarck, when he became the first Chancellor. I guess they kept it.
Seeing that Hitler was clearly such a big racist, industry leaders urged Hindenburg to give Hitler the chancellorship, fearing the rising support for communism, and leader of the Center Party von Papen, who had been secretly negotiating with Hitler, said to Hindenburg, "How about we make Hitler chancellor on the condition that I get to be vice-chancellor and most government jobs go to us moderate conservatives? That way, I'll get to keep my power. We'll get to keep our power and we'll control Hitler like he's our angry little puppet." What could possibly go wrong?
Everything.
It turned out, everything. Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in January 1933, but he was not yet a dictator. In February, the German parliament building was set on fire.
Honestly, my opinion, I think they did it. I think they had the perfect reasoning to do it. Either that or actually was communists, but maybe set up by the Germans. The only downside I see is that I feel like they also love Germany so much that I don't know if they would burn a building just so they can get political points. Burn such an important building. But I think they did.
Historians still aren't sure who did it, and many suspect the Nazis did it themselves, but Hitler blamed the communists, and he convinced President Hindenburg to sign an emergency decree allowing him to imprison all communists and other political opponents. Communists and others were sent off to the first concentration camp in Dachau. At this time, the elderly President Hindenburg passed away, giving Hitler the perfect opportunity.
I don't like communists. I think they're ignorant and dumb. But you know what? You shouldn't kill people just because they have different political opinions than you.
Introduced a law to Parliament that would allow him to make all future laws and decisions entirely on his own. With his political opponents imprisoned and the SA intimidating others, Hitler's law passed. Just 2 months after becoming Chancellor, Hitler was now a dictator. He still had one problem. The leader of the SA wanted the SA to take over the job of the regular German army, and the German army didn't like that idea. Hitler needed to maintain the support of his professionally trained German army, more so than his rough and rowdy SA. So one night in June 1934, he had Röhm and many other of his own SA officers rounded up and murdered. While he was at it, he took the opportunity to brutally settle some personal scores as well. Politicians who had disagreed with him in the past, reporters who had printed negative articles about him, one guy who did absolutely nothing, but they thought he was someone else. In some cases, even their families were murdered.
Just pure evil. Like, just pure evil.
In total, up to 200 people were killed in what became known as the Night of the Long Knives. The army,
Crystal Knot.
now satisfied that they wouldn't be replaced, pledged total allegiance to their new Führer, and Hitler's control was now absolute.
Control the military, control the people, you take all the power. You control everything.
Life in Germany changed violently. Freedom of the
If I were to lead the country, if I were to become a dictator, I would start fixing things up. Like, no one did anything that was trying to fix Germany. I would focus on fixing the economy, all that kind of stuff. Easier said than done, though. Also, I think annexing Austria would be a good idea. More land, more resources to work together. Austrians are ethnically German, so it'd automatically be more of like a national spirit kind of thing. I feel like that would uplift a lot of people.
press, expression, and public assembly were suspended. Jews were initially branded and their businesses boycotted. And eventually, Hitler would go on to have 6 million Jewish men, women, and children killed in concentration camps. Hundreds of thousands of people were forced into sterilization for physical and mental imperfections.
I want to read this a bit.
Physical and mental imperfections. The Hitler Youth became a way to brainwash the young. Boys were trained to fight and returned home from camp violent. Girls were told their purpose was to have many pure Aryan children, and they would sometimes return from camp pregnant. When their parents were understandably horrified, their children would threaten to turn them over to the Gestapo for standing in.
Imagine brainwashing the children into like going against their own parents like that. That's awful. It says in the Bible that that's like evil. That you shouldn't. A child has to honor their mother and father. That's a commandment. And they brainwash these children to breaking God's commandments. How sad. Oh, how sad.
In the way of Germany's greatness. The standard greeting changed, and you could be sent to a concentration camp for not using it. This way, it seemed like everyone was a Nazi supporter. If you dared oppose Hitler or speak out against him in any way, you also would be sent to a concentration.
I wonder, did they still have the car? His car or something? I feel like they would keep that mouse somewhere.
Camp. German nationalism captivated the young Adolf. Extreme ideology and anti-Semitism festered in him as a young man living a hard life on the streets. Germany's defeat in the First World War filled him with hatred and a thirst for vengeance. A political movement that treated him like a god, and hundreds of thousands looking up to him as their savior, made him a megalomaniac.
His idea was that he could fix everything. He can fix it all for Germany. And that made everyone love and care for him. Like, that made all the Germans cheer for him because they thought, hey, finally things will get fixed. He's someone who actually cares for the German people. He did care for the German people, just he went way too far in the wrong way.
And soon, his aggressive foreign policies would drag the world into a second tragic global conflict, otherwise known as
So that's the end, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe. That's kind of what I've got, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.